So it is time for our next presentation, and I get to join for this one. I get to play a role. So we have Matt Smith, who, if you've ever been here before, you know, because he's one of our favorites, and he's always a streaming media regular. And he is now with Comcast Technology Solutions, and we are going to be having a little fireside chat. Do you have some fireside for us?
I do.
Okay.
I have fire ready.
All right. Fireside chat about hybrid monetization models.
Just set this in between us. It'll be nice and toasty. Anyone have any marshmallows?
It's very cozy that way. Yeah. All right, so hybrid monetization models, but I think some introductions would be a good way to start. So tell us about Comcast Technology Solutions and about yourself.
Sure. So as Troy says, I'm a frequent visitor here. I think I've been here for somewhere near 15 or 16 years. Stream Media All-Star, all that good stuff, and have been here with a variety of companies and seen this show grow and grow. And now I'm with Comcast Technology Solutions. So surely you've heard about Comcast, but Comcast Technology Solutions is a B2B or business-to-business entity that helps broadcasters and service providers and those who would bring D2C video offerings to market. So we provide the tools and technologies they need to associate metadata and transcode content, prepare live channels and deliver them to the Comcast CDN or public CDN. So in a nutshell, if you're the next Hulu or like brand and you're bringing a D2C service to market, chances are we have the technology to do that, and it's the same technology that powers the Xfinity experience. So that's what CTS does.
So they bring the content. It sounds like you do everything else to put it in front of viewers.
That's correct.
And providing content is kind of the easy part. What they really want to do is make money with that content.
Make money, whether it's through subscriptions or whether it's through ad models that we'll dive into here in a second. Yes, You're right. Let's not say it's easy. Acquiring the content, licensing the content can be done very effectively, but as you say, putting together the tools to deliver that, some entities approach that from a piecemeal perspective and pluggable elements, or you can choose to do the entire soup to nuts piece. And again, from the side of our business that's been doing this for years, we know how to acquire signals and properly process them, deliver them to either the living room or to a D2C type environment as well.
So let's talk about these monetization models. We've got a lot of VODs. We've got SVOD, TVOD, AVOD, others. Tell us what that means and how they differ.
So everyone's familiar with that term VOD. So the letters in front of them denote different things. So subscription VOD is a simple way to call it as a Hulu or a Netflix. You pay a monthly fee, you access all that content, crunch all you want, and they'll make tons more. AVOD describes advertising supported on-demand content. So you may be watching a show on your favorite network's app or website, and in that first commercial break, you see a couple of ads come up. In recent years, people have grumbled about, why should I have to watch ads? But if you think about it, it's the very same consumption model as it is when you watch in your home. The difference is you're paying for that overall subscription. And TVOD is transactional VOD. So you're watching your home cable service, and you're browsing the on-demand titles, and like the previous presenter said, you may find a movie that you like and you want to sit and watch with a significant other or your child, and you just click and pay $4.99, and voila, there you've got it. So I think what we want to probably talk about next is, can you move a viewer from one to the other? Like, is there a progression?
Is that what hybrid strategy means? To move from one to the other, or to just offer different possibilities?
Well, I think that offering all of those possibilities to whomever is delivering the content is paramount. You don't want to pigeonhole them and say, well, this will only work. We only think this works in this case. Because if you think about it, the journey usually for some of these providers is to take the viewer from one model to another, perhaps. So if you have someone, any of us encounter a service and you engage with the content and the titles, And the goal is to get you hooked, right? In a good way, not in a bad way. But you find a show that you like, you watch an episode, you're like, oh gosh, that was good, I want to watch another one. And at some point, you have to engage with that consumer ideally to get them to say, okay, I'm in, I want to buy into this service. So in that case, we're going from AVOD to SVOD. So we've got someone watching an episode of a show, they watch a couple of ads that come up in those natural breaks, they're okay with that. So the provider's monetizing that content through the AVOD model. Once you've watched that second or third episode, you say, I really like this, I'm willing to pay $5 a month or $9 a month. Then we've got you migrated from an AVOD to an SVOD model, and maybe those ads go away, maybe the number of the ads compress a bit, so in a break, instead of watching 6 or 7 ads, you're only watching 2. Sometimes there are none. That varies from provider to provider. But the idea is, and the key takeaway here is, make sure that as you develop these strategies and put these products out in market, that you're not in this binge-worthy society or scenarios that we have today. You don't want that freebie guy or girl to consume all the episodes of that show and look at the rest of the catalog and say, I'm out. So you've lost them as a potential subscriber. They've engaged with the content. Maybe you've monetized that free watching through the AVOD model, but you failed to convert them to SVOD, right? So that's a significant miss. So think about that as you build that strategy.
So we've been talking about on-demand content. What does Comcast Tech Solutions say for live linear content?
For live linear, it's fairly straightforward because of the notion of linear. The event's happening, it's happening in real time. There are natural ad breaks. So the broadcasters and the networks come to us and say, help me monetize those ad breaks in my live content. Because I may be contractually prohibited from enabling the ads that are in the broadcast to pass through, or I want to be able to take maybe I take those ads and sell both of the avails, if you will, the eyeballs, or sometimes they say I want to take additional ads and cover up, if you will, replace the ads in the break with ads that a digital sales team has gone out and sold. So we're natively able to do that. We read the native markers that are in that signal that's referred to as SCTE or SCUTty. We read those markers. We know where the beginning and the end of the break is. In fact, in some of the more complex workflows, we can determine not only where the beginning and the end is, but also where the boundary between a national and a regional or a local ad is. So to give an example, Fox may be streaming American Idol, and Coke and Ford and Tide Detergent have paid a lot of money for both broadcast and digital audiences, so we'd want to pass through those 3 ads, but the back half of that break might be carved aside for your regional Ford dealer or your a local business that's bought ads through the Fox station or the O&O group.
So the content owner, they're hooked, they want to provide some ads, they want to monetize their content. Do they have to make some kind of upfront cost to get the kind of equipment they need, or can they leverage their existing infrastructure?
Very good question. Generally, no. You can leverage existing infrastructure. In most of the TV markets in the country, the ability exists to capitalize on those triggers we've described. Having done this a bunch of years, I'm familiar with stations in smaller markets who say, we don't have that in our broadcast playout technology. Well, we can still improvise, and improvise meaning it's not a temporary solution. We can jump in and use a black box scenario, if you will, a trigger that ties into a broadcast switcher and also ties into a hardware encoder that essentially sends an electronic signal rather, that signifies the same portions of that break. So in general, we can do it across the board with broadcasters and enable that type of thing to happen.
So can we create a streamlined end-to-end solution that would be efficient for them?
Oh, absolutely.
Easy to implement?
Yeah, absolutely. Because more of the components are working together, it's more cohesive, less fault tolerant, and frankly easier for the operator to operate.
Okay. So once they've gotten started with this, is there a way that they could keep track of what's happening, take a look at the results they're getting, and maybe make tweaks to improve the monetization for their own content?
That's a good question. And it involves a more complex network, if you will. So the ability for us to act as a technology enabler of a broadcaster in that scenario is understood, it's well known, and it happens each and every day. When you talk about real-time analytics and metrics, whether it's from video starts and plays, and then getting into what ads were played and where, that data, well, number one, we should say that data is closely held and protected. We have to be very cognizant of that. It's PPI, personally protected information. But as a broadcaster, I do want to know how my content's performing, where people are watching, and then ultimately, to your point, although I'll say it's a bit future-looking, how those ads are performing as well. Generally, with ad payloads, those totals are rolled up and fed back to the broadcaster, the customer, if you will, within several hours. We are an arm's length from that sort of situation. So we're providing the tools and technology to deliver the product and for the viewer to engage with. The ad decisions that are made, which ads and where and at what frequency, are handled by the ad decisioning network, generally a freewheel or a double-click type of scenario.
So what does the monetization feedback loop look like, and what kind of changes would people make in a real-world situation to tweak their earnings?
Well, taking the data that they learned from, that we've just described, how content is being engaged with, how long people are watching, how many people are starting up a stream in Toledo, Ohio versus New York City, is very valuable data. And our customers can take that data through that feedback loop and look at it over time and say, we ran a particular show at a particular time, it did really well at 8 p.m. In a live scenario, or we simulcast our newscasts, and the morning show does really, really well. The midday show, not so much. The evening news, yes and no, and then they can make programming decisions about what they want, where they want it, and really tweak and tune the performance, or even think about moving something in or out of a particular slot. And I would say too, the interesting element to this is we have technologies now that are coming to market where our customers can schedule different shows to air at different times in a D2C product than they would in a broadcast product. So, for example, if you know that a live event does well at a particular time, you can schedule that and it plays out as a live event. And then if you've got a show that you know does well at another time, but maybe it's not airing on the broadcast, but you have an on-demand asset of it sitting in your repository, you can program that to run where you can build an entirely different schedule of content to live in a D2C world than does in the broadcast world.
So are you saying taking assets and making sort of appointment viewing out of things that are from your existing library?
Yes, appointment viewing, and you might even call it an alternate live signal, if you would.
Mm-hmm. So you're getting sort of a tune-in opportunity, some kind of marketing hype around something that you could have put on at any time, but you're choosing to put on at the best time.
Correct. Or even engaging viewers who really resonate with certain titles, for example. So let's say you're a fan of HGTV and you like Fixer Upper, or you like the Property Brothers, right? These are very familiar shows that they air. Let's say that they do well when they air in your D2C product. The ad fill rates and the ad fulfillment is very good. Well, what's to say you couldn't just say, let's program an entire day of Fixer Upper on Monday, and Tuesday's all Property Brothers, and Wednesday's Caribbean Beach Life. These are all shows that do well when they air, and when I, as a programmer, air them in a marathon, they do really well. So I could build a direct-to-consumer channel that airs those anytime. We can even customize it to the viewer, and likely capitalize on those same viewing trends and the ad fill rates.
So it's about taking things and sort of marketing them, presenting them in different ways, and getting people excited about it in a whole new way.
Right, and ideally capitalizing on the monetization models therein.
Mm-hmm. Let's take our monetization model that we've talked about and let's expand it internationally now. What do you see succeeding in other markets, and how do other markets differ from the U.S.?
In European markets, we are sometimes challenged by the fact that the native signals in the broadcast that we've talked about, the SCUDdy markers, aren't always there. So we have to leverage other means. One is the one I talked about earlier, where we're talking about GPI triggers and hooking into the broadcast gear. Others could mean, big red button where you just know where the brake's going to hit and you're going to trigger it. We've also seen some where an algorithm can kind of analyze content as it goes and capitalize on a couple of things. So, for example, if the logo, disappears when you're going to brake, or there's a couple frames of black between the program and the ad, or there's a difference in volume, although in Europe, not as much, but sometimes you'll notice that an ad sounds a little louder than the program you're watching. So sometimes a confluence of those things can help generate almost a flag that says something changed here. So some organizations are able to capitalize on that and be able to replicate replace ads in regions where the natural triggers aren't as common.
How would people want to adjust their U.S. ad monetization strategies as they bring them abroad? Are there things that just work better in different countries than here?
In general, I mean, yes, I think so. So with certain channels here, I think similar rules apply overseas where general rules apply. If it's an episodic piece of content and it's a 30-minute show and you've got 3 breaks, we see some that say maybe it doesn't make sense to throw the entirety of the break, the full ad payload, in this particular show. So instead of 8 ad units, let's maybe cut it in half down to 4, or compressing the breaks across that piece of content. So in the first break, maybe you're hit with 6 ads, and because you're interested in the show and it's the first break, you power through it, whereas the other 2 breaks we're delivering fewer ads. Kind of rewarding that continuing behavior, the continuous viewing, if you will, and serving them a few more ads. That we see that a little bit here in the U.S. I think we see it even more in Europe, where sometimes there's a little more resistance to those ads in the content.
I feel like in the U.S. I see a lot where they have short ad breaks up front, and they don't assume that you're hooked from the start. They need to keep you hooked, get you hooked, and then at the end they get a lot longer.
Agreed. I think it depends on broadcaster and it depends on service provider.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen both sides of that one.
Okay. So do you have any case studies you could share with us about how a content owner has taken the same piece of content and maybe their monetization approach has varied from market to market? Someone at Comcast Tech Solutions thinks you have a case study.
We have. So we've seen some scenarios where normal ad rules apply, and here in this country, traditional ad replacement has worked, AVOD monetization has worked just fine, and you take that same piece of content into a different territory where people's perception, behavior, and tolerance is frankly different. And they've taken completely different approaches and maybe concatenated an entire show, compressed all the breaks, and had a couple of pre-roll ads up front, maybe a post-roll. So maybe the post-roll goes unwatched, but the pre-roll ads are watched, the content's watched. You set a behavior, the viewer will continue to interact with those shows and not adhere to the traditional ad models. We've seen some success with that.
Very good. I've asked enough questions here. I wonder if our people out there would like to ask a question. Do we have a question for Matt? You got an expert here. Take advantage of it.
I have a couple. Number one, in terms of your technology, can I, let's say, specify a specific market for an ad to be specifically, let's say, a zip code or a specific geographic region? Let's say zip code 125, for example. Make that ad different from zip code 126. And then another question I address is something that YouTube encountered when now you talk about video on demand and content. Do you distinguish, or any way you discriminate as to the content of these ads before you broadcast them? Because I know they had issues regarding that, combining video transmission and putting ads that really don't conform to the content.
I'll take the last one first. So I think you're talking about questionable speech or content in the ads. We do not police that. Again, we're providing the framework and the technology to deliver to the channel and the content. We're, like I say, an arm's length from the ad decisioning network. They ultimately are working with the programmer to determine how many ads, the frequency of those ads, and frankly, who's buying. So we are part of the ecosystem, and if something like that were to happen, we would certainly want to go back and review what policies are in place upstream of us. But ultimately, we're provided with the ad payload. We properly format it and place it into the stream of programming. But ultimately, we don't have anyone there watching the stream for that type of content. But I would hope someone upstream is. To the first part of your question, lost my train of thought.
Zip codes.
Zip codes, yes. One of my favorite areas, actually. So yes, the answer to your question is yes. Although I will say we're at the early stages of enabling this type of delivery. However, if you think about it, everyone has a phone in their pocket, and it has a GPS chip in it that can essentially tell these networks where you are and what where you're moving to. The best analogy I like to give on this is that an advertiser like Starbucks, for example, could say, you are half a mile from a store that's on 6th Avenue, and we would like to buy 50,000 ad impressions in this zip code, or even a portion. Well, I think it's down to the zip code. Let's stay with that. In a zip code between 1 and 3 p.m. And if you're watching something, you see the ad, and maybe there's an interstitial that pops up saying tap here for a coupon. You tap it and get $1 off your Tazo tea or whatever it is. You go into that store and interact with it. That's been a good experience all around for you as the viewer. You saved a little bit of money. The advertiser got you into their location. Those are the types of engagements that these devices and these channels and the content can provide. We're beginning to see some of these broadcasters and advertisers put their toe in the water there. I think we're going to see a lot more of it in the next 12 to 18 months.